In this video we're going to be making DCC powered tail lights. In this example we're going to fit it into an N Gauge brake van for a cost of around £3. So the tail light is an LED powered by the DCC rails using some electronics. It also has a stay alive capacitor to help it stay illuminated when it goes over dead spots in the track or frogs in the points. There are many ways to do this, and I'm not saying this is the best way, it's simply a way that's worked for me. And by sharing I hope it stimulates some ideas for you to use on your layout. So to build this we need some parts. We need some pickups to pick up the power from the rails, some wheels with metal axles and metal tyres, and I'll cover this in detail later on. The LED, which is a pre-wired SMD type, which I'll cover in more detail later as well. A bridge rectifier to convert the DCC alternating current to DC. A dropper resistor, and of course a brake van to fit it in, and this is a Peco N Gauge brake van. You will also need the stay alive capacitor and some conductive paint, which we'll talk about later. I purchased the LED from eBay in a pack of 10, and they are SMD pre-wired type, and they come in various sizes. This is a 0402 size, and it's as small as I could get, and as you can see it's tiny, it's about 1mm wide, but perfect for N gauge or N scale applications. If you're working in larger scales, obviously you would want a larger LED to suit the scale. Okay, so let's start by stripping down the brake van. The first thing to do is to remove the wheels. We won't be using these wheels, as the wheels we'll replace will be the metal tire and the metal axle wheels. Once the wheels are removed, it exposes these two small nuts. There's a nut on each end of the brake van, and it's these nuts that hold the base onto the actual van itself with the weight plate in between. So we remove these two nuts, and then that will allow us to pull the base off and separate the van, strip it down, ready for us working on it. Okay, so that's the van all stripped down, so now we can start looking at how we're going to route the wires through the base. So obviously you've got the metal weight here, so the obvious thing is to use this centre hole to feed the wires through. So let's have a look first how we're actually going to mount the pickup, as this will determine the wire routing really. Before mounting the terminals, I should just talk about the pickups that I've used. Now I purchased this assortment pack that's got several different types in the pack. And they're from Trainer-matic, and I bought these from DCC supplies. But you can also buy packs of the same type of pickup once you know the ones that you want to use. And for context, this is the pickup I've used on this ruler. The small divisions are millimetres, so you can see it's the long side is about 21mm. My original thinking was to mount the pickups like this and use two small self-tappers to fasten the pickup to the base. But then I started thinking about the actual weight, and the self-tappers may interfere with the base. So as an afterthought, I thought I'll try mounting a terminal onto the posts where these nuts go, and then use a bit of an unorthodox method of bending the terminal strip back to form a spring under the axle. So I think that's what I'm going to do. We can fit it here, and then we can feed the wire through the centre. So then on the other side, if you remember, we can actually, if I just remove that, we have got the hole in the weight, so we can drill through to the inside of the van, and that way we don't need to bother messing with the weight, drilling with the weight, and I certainly want to leave the weight in to keep the weight in the base of the van. So I'm going to use a small pin drill here to drill through the base into the van, and just be careful that you don't puncture yourself with the drill as it goes through, else that'll hurt. Okay, so that's the hole into the van, and now we just need to drill the base. I'm just going to use the van as a guide to mark the base, so that I can drill through knowing it's exactly lined up. Okay, so that's now through. Okay, so that's the hole in the base done. So now we can look at mounting the pickups themselves. So as the terminals are made of stainless steel, soldering wasn't going to be an option. So what I'm going to do is twist the wires round tightly like this to secure them while I mount the terminals, and then once the pickup terminals are secured to the base by the nut that holds the van together, they will be mechanically secure. Well, that's the plan. So I'm just going to thread these wires through the black base, and then I can feed them through the weights into the van itself. Okay, so that's the terminal wires threaded through. So now I can start fastening them to the post and put the nut on top. Now I'm not going to lie, this is a fiddly job. I want to use tweezers so as not to strip the plastic post with the nut. Okay, I'm just going to temporarily tighten that, get the other side lined up, then I'll come back and tighten these terminals properly. So let's skip forward to save you the pain of watching me struggle putting the nuts on. Okay, so there's the terminals or the pickups secured down. So now we can move on to the wheels. So the wheels I'm using here have this metal axle, but they also have this plastic insulator that insulates the axle from the metal tyre, so you don't get a short circuit when the wheels are running on the track normally. But for our purposes today, we need to use some conductive paint to paint over the plastic insulator to join one side of the axle with one wheel only to the axle and the metal tyre. So what we're doing is we're connecting one wheel to the axle with the conductive paint, and of course when we put the wheels onto the van, the side with the conductive paint will be on opposite sides. So one axle will conduct from the wheel to the axle on one side, and then the opposite axle will conduct from the track and the wheel on the other side. So then we can use the axle as a pickup for each track side. Crikey, that turned into a tongue twister. Hope that made sense. Okay, so I'm going to do the other wheel and leave them to dry, and meanwhile we can start fitting the LED. So I'm going to use a pin drill and drill a small hole through the back of the brake van, and then we can feed the wire through this end panel and then down through the floor and back up through another hole into the van out of sight. I have just realised I actually haven't drilled a hole in the floor or put the couplings back in, so I will glue this LED in first, and then later I will come back, take the base off again and fit the couplings and drill the other hole in the floor. So this is just super glue gel that I'm using to do this. Just takes a bit longer to set, but it's a little bit stronger than normal super glue. Okay, so fast forward to the base off again. So I've drilled the second hole, although I forgot to film it, to feed the wire down through the base, as you can see here, then back up through the first hole. So I've already shown you the base going back together, so I'm not going to show you that again, and we can skip straight forward to putting the wheels onto the base. Now this is quite a fiddly job. They are a bit tight, these wheels, but they do get there eventually, so that feels okay. You can see the conductive paint there. So let's get the second wheel on, bending the terminal forward so it forms a spring contact under the wheel, and there's both wheels on. Now I did feel that the wheels moved on the axle, so I'm just checking the back to back to check they're okay. But also, if they have moved, that means that the conductive paint has cracked, and you know, potentially no continuity. So I'm just going to put another blob of conductive paint on each axle to make sure that we have got good conductivity. So that's the wheel on that side. Spin it round and do the wheel on the opposite side. The wires get out of the way. Okay, just another touch there, just in case the paint's been cracked and the wheels are moved. So we know the back-to-backs are good, and the wheel with conductive paint are on opposite sides, so I think we're all good. So I'm just going to clean the axle and the tyres with a fibre pencil, and that way we know we get a good contact for the pickup to the axle and the wheel to the track. So to test the pickups, I've joined these two pickup wires together here, so then I can put a multimeter on each rail of the track and check continuity from the two track rails through to the pickup wires. So it's not zero, but 40 ohms-ish isn't bad. So I think we're ready to move on to the wiring now. And so this is how all the components connect together, and I'm going to go through each connection in turn now. So these two bottom connections with the sinusoidal symbol connect to the track pickup wires. Here I'm using red wires to connect to this positive connection on the bridge rectifier, and then we connect one side of the resistor and also to the positive side of the electrolytic capacitor. And the capacitor must be connected the correct way round. I've then used a black wire to connect to the negative connection on the bridge rectifier. That goes to the negative connection on the capacitor, and then also to the black wire on negative side of the LED. The negative side of an electrolytic capacitor is normally marked, and I'll show an example of this shortly. The final connection is then to connect the red or positive side of the LED to the other side of the dropper resistor. I've put a pencil mark on the bridge rectifier on the positive terminal here. As it will be face down, I won't be able to see these markings when I'm working on it, so it helps to identify where the markings are. So I know with the pencil mark here, this is a positive, and the two terminals opposite are the track connections, with the other connection being the negative terminal. So let's just talk about this capacitor. This electrolytic capacitor is rated at 16 volts, so you must not use more than 16 volts with this capacitor. And as mentioned, this negative marking here on the side must be connected to the negative terminal and the other terminal to positive, or else the capacitor will be damaged. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting some flying leads onto this electrolytic capacitor, and that will make it easier to mount into the brake van. So I'm just going to tin both the leads on the capacitor, but when I put the flying leads onto the capacitor, I will still put some heat shrink sleeving on to reduce the risk of shorting. Okay, so let's just tin these and get them on. Okay, there's lead number one onto the negative connection, and there's the positive connection. Okay, that's that done. Okay, and as I said earlier, I'm just going to pop some heat shrink sleeving over these. So I'll just quickly put that on, and I'll use a soldering iron just to shrink that onto both leads. Okay, so I'll just finish shrinking on that sleeving. Okay, that's almost done. Just a bit more there. So it's there. That should do, I think. I'm just going to pop some black tack on the bottom of this capacitor to help hold it in place. If you've not used black tack, it's like blue tack but much stickier. And I use it a lot for fitting decoders, etc. So you can see now with the black tack, the capacitor fits nice and snug into the brake van. And it's looking good. I think we're ready to start wiring up the rectifier. Okay, so for space saving, I'm going to fit the dropper resistor over the top of the rectifier and solder it directly onto the positive terminal. Okay, so I'll just solder this resistor onto this positive terminal. Get some solder on, not too much. Okay, so just trim that resistor lead, and then we can get the red wire on. So this is the red wire from the positive connection on the electrolytic capacitor. That's okay. Then I'm going to put both black wires, the black wire from the capacitor and the black wire from the LED, onto the negative terminal, and then the red positive wire from the LED onto the other side of the dropper resistor. Okay, so now we just need to solder on the two track pickup wires onto the other side of the rectifier. So that's one, that's the second one, and I think we're all wired up, and then once this is done we can get it into the van and tidy up some wiring. I have put some black tack underneath the rectifier to hold it in place, and it fits nice and snug into this N Gauge brake van. So I'm also going to put some liquid insulating tape on the end of this resistor to stop it shorting out on any of the rectifier terminal. The insulating liquid tape I use is this stuff. It's just very easy to get into tight places like this. So I'm going to bob some on, then I'll come back to you once I've stuck some on. Okay, so that's liquid tape on, so nicely insulated there, the end of the resistor from the rectifier terminals. So now we just need to tidy up some wiring, get the roof back on the brake van, and we're good to go. I have used some black tack as well to hold the wires in place. So just make sure they're on snugly down, get the roof on, and I think we're almost done. Just make sure that you haven't got any wire strands or anything shorting out the pickup to the wheel tyre. You can see here I did have some strands that I thought were too close for comfort, so just make sure you check that on both ends. Okay, and there we have a DCC powered tail light that will keep running for a few seconds when lifted off the track. Thanks for watching this video, especially if you've watched it this far. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye now.